It's a long journey from, from Australia straight to Singapore, then to Vietnam. I assume you're by yourself, or at least not with people you know really well.
That's right.
At this time. What type of thoughts collected your mind? Are you just going over the things you've been trained, or are you just living in the moment? Is there fear? Is there worry?
It's a bit like football training, which you'd know about, I'm sure.
Sure.
And that is that you go out and do all your football training pre-season, and you're working out who your mates are and how it all works and how it all fits together and what your routines are. And then somebody says, would you like to go and play football?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's the emotion. Yeah.
And where you were stationed, what was that like? Was it because people may be thinking a battle zone? Is it more of a city?
Well, I'm reluctant to give you too much in terms of the political and historic and all the rest of it background. Essentially, what it is a small town made up of two kinds of people. One group of people are the original inhabitants of the area who've been, by the South Vietnamese government, told that they must go and live inside the town because the bush in that area, both the bush and some of the rural properties in that area, were now being infiltrated by Viet Cong. So they were two kinds of Viet Cong, local village people who actually recruited locally, and then there's what they call the area units, and they were full-time Viet Cong. So D445, which is the name of the unit, which is involved in that famous Battle of Long Tan, they were infiltrating and operating in small groups all over the less well-populated area and there. So the South Vietnamese government said to stop them from recruiting and stop them from getting food and blah, 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 and information, we will require all of the population from that area, probably 400 or 500 people, to move into what they called armed hamlets. And those armed hamlets had barbed wire around them and lookouts and like army reservists looking after the perimeter. And during the day, people went out and did their business. They weren't supposed to go into the cleared zones, but many of them did. And I was in that village. Now, the second group of people are people who used to live in North Vietnam, but in 1956 or 1954, whenever my brain's gone to sleep on it, 1956, I think, when Vietnam was split into North Vietnam and South Vietnam, large numbers of Catholic North Vietnamese people fled. I think, don't quote me, but I think 1.6 million people fled south.
Wow.
And they were relocated in all these rural areas as well as the cities. And so in the town, most of the, what you'd call middle class, people who had been involved in business, people who had contact with Western, a lot of contact with Western cultures and that sort of thing, they tended to be the ones that came from the north. The locals tended to be Buddhist, so they didn't like the Catholics. Mm-hmm. They tended to be Buddhist and they tended to be local, okay? And there was tension between the two. And when talking to these people, they saw, the Buddhists saw the government of South Vietnam under Diem and all those people as being the posh wealthy who don't understand the Buddhists, who are Catholic and pro-American and all the rest of it. Whereas the people who came from the north, who came and lived in the village, they tended to be, we fled those dreadful people up there, and isn't it great that we've been given a chance to re-establish ourselves down here, and thank you for coming and helping and all the rest. So they really didn't talk communism versus free Western. No, they didn't talk like that. It was all more about, as I was saying in the car on the way here, more about the tension between Scots and English.
Right.
It's that
yeah.
different culture.
That undertone.
Yeah.
Of just like, you give them a bit of a look.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so my job was to work with these people and try and, now what does a 21-year-old Up Dai Loy, that's what they called Australians, how does he make friends amongst that mob? I had an absolutely flukish insight as a result of a recording, would you believe? And I'll explain it to you. You'll feel really comfortable with this. One evening, we have a system in the army called Stand To. So on dusk and on dawn, you gather up your gear and get ready to move in a hurry. So it's called Stand To. And one evening, in the heat of the summer, I'm sitting in this mud and thatch building, and I could hear this singing. And I said to somebody there, I've forgotten who it was now, "What's the singing?" And he said, "Singing? What singing?" I said, "Can't you hear it? It's like wavering in the dusk." "Oh," he said, that'll be the women of the village planting rice. He said what they do is they line up knee deep in mud. They line up and they've got a basket of seedlings in the back, and as they sing, they take a pace forward in time with their song.
Wow.
And they put the seedlings in, and it makes the job go a bit easier, and everybody's working together. I said, "All right." So what do they sing about? He said, "Oh, some bullshit, you know." Yeah. So anyway, the following day, in order to start up a conversation, I said to this middle-aged lady in the village, "I heard you singing last night. It was beautiful. And as the sun was going down, and it was a hot day, and the insects were all making noises, but over the top of it all, I could hear this wailing kind of song." What do they say? Oh, she got all embarrassed and looked down and carried on. And I said, "Come on, you must tell me. What's and all that?" She said, "Well, it's a sad story." She said, "When we used to fight the Chinese, back in hundreds of years ago," he said, "all the bodies of our young men would come back to us." And he said, and the widows or the mothers would receive their fallen troops on their shields. And this was a ceremony to hand the shield over to the parents for burial. And he said, and the ceremony this song is about that ceremony. I said, "That's a wonderful story." I said, I had no idea. I said, "Would you tell me, can you give me the word?" "No, I can't give you the words." "Oh, right." So next time I was back in the headquarters, I said to one of the sergeants in there, I said, "What's the chance of my getting a tape recorder?" Because in those days there were Sonys about that big and that square and 2 reels, you know. And he said, "No, you can't get it." So I spoke to one of the officers. I said, "Look, I think I could make friends with a lot of people with one of those, because they've never seen one of those bloody things." He said, "Oh yeah, well we'll see what we can do." A couple of weeks later, the chopper came out, and I got the bloody with a gadget to attach to my Land Rover to recharge the batteries. So I went over to this lady and went to see her at a program, and I said, "Can I get you to sing the song?" And I said, "I'll play it back to you." So anyway, to cut a long story short, everywhere I went in Zuyen Mok and around that area, I was welcomed. "Hassie Ted, Kale, come here, Hale, we've got a song for you." So I'm established really good, and that was a total fluke. It was not intended to do that, but it really worked well.
Probably a question no Westerner had ever asked is what that song was.
Yeah.
And it's quite profound to think that they're still singing about, their fallen loved ones
culture,
hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
What an interesting place to be, that different culture, particularly
absolutely.
at a young age.
Oh yeah. Well, I wouldn't tell my wife now, but
She won't say this.
I wouldn't tell my wife now, but I probably would actually. But there was one of the young ladies made me think very seriously about staying.
Ah.
I wanted to stay. Been there maybe 7 months or 8 months or something. I really felt at home there. They were very kind to me. They really were. People would say to me they'd say, "Hassie Ted, why don't you come over for tea and you can teach the kids some English?"
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. They trust you.
They did.
To go into their home.
Well, some of them did, and not all of them did. But of course, at the same time, I'm writing intelligence reports.
Yes.
And on one occasion, got a bit of a coup. I said to this lady, I said, whoever goes out on that road, you wouldn't think that anybody go out on that. You're not allowed to go out that way. Who would go there? She said, "Oh, there's one man who goes out there on his tuk-tuk," what they call, well, you'd know them as tuk-tuks, but they call them something else. One man goes out there every week. I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Oh, yeah. Well, who's he?" He said, "Oh, he's the bloke with that." I said, "Oh, right, okay." So I said, "Do you know anybody out there who lives down there?" "Yeah," she said, "My cousin lives down there." And she said, "Well, where does he?" "Oh, yeah. Well, which way does he go when he gets to the fork?" I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." So we plotted this, and they determined that he was actually resupplying rice to the VC.
Oh, wow.
And as a result of that, they were able to conduct operations to clean up the... but that's just simply talking to one of the locals.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was this a dangerous place to be in this camp?
Look, it probably was, because the RNC, the local militia, if you like, were not terribly trustworthy. If anybody came towards them with an AK-47, they'd probably run away. So it's perfectly possible that the place could get raided or overrun. But it wouldn't be a smart thing for them to do, because 5K away or 8K away or something like that, there was the fast support base, whatever it was called, with 155mm guns on it.
Okay. Yeah, bad move.
Well, so it is a dangerous place, but you're more likely to get murdered with a knife rather than attacked by a formal. And in fact, I got one warning which probably did save my life. Kid came in running in one night and said, "Hassie Ted, Mama-san say you're no sleep here tonight." And I looked at him, he was about 8 or 9 years old. I said, who's your Mama-san? He just turned around. So I turned around to one of the other Vietnamese. I said, what does that? Oh, don't take it notice, some bloody kids, you know, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, that's a really unusual message. Who's Mama-san, you know? Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if we did move. So I moved out of the hut that we're normally in and went and saw one of the, he actually ran a tea shop, this bloke, and I said to him, "Any chance I can sleep on your veranda tonight?" He said, yeah, no worries, in return for some English lessons. I said, yeah, that's all right. So I slept there for 2 nights, and then nothing happened and there were no incidents, so I moved back. I didn't do anything about it for a month. And until I was back in headquarters, and I walked in the tent, the intelligence tent in the headquarters, and they all started going, here comes bloody Hollywood. Hey, Ted, Hassie Ted, bloody Hollywood. I said, what's all that about? He said, come and have a look at this. Captured document, hit list, Zwien Mok, Hassie Ted.
Wow.
Now, whether those two issues are actually connected, and I got a warning, or whether it's purely coincidental, I don't know to this day.
How do you go seeing that and then walking back into the town? Like, do you change your trust?
You're probably looking over your shoulder a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I felt that I was surrounded by people who would support me, you know.
And getting that warning, or if that's what it was, is often, well, it would obviously be a very clear-cut understanding for you that you know you are welcome there by some of the people.
Yeah.
And if old mate to let you sleep on his veranda, and it's such a strange thing to think you could be in a war zone and yet you're making friends.
Well, it's what you call low-level warfare, which means that it's a guerrilla warfare. It's a bit like being if you're a German soldier being in the French resistance in Second World War.
Sure.
I mean, the vast majority of your time you never see anyone, but when it goes bang, and you get killed. You know.